Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to welcome our speaker this morning, Jim Holland. Jim is co-director of the Distributed Cognition and HCI Lab with Ed Hutchins at University of California, San Diego, and also the Ubiquitous Computing and Social Dynamics Research Group with Bill Griswold, who some of us know, and Barry Brown. And he has a wide range of research interests, which he'll be covering in part here today, most of which touch on cognitive consequences of computationally based media. And I will let him describe some of that work. I've known Jim since I was a graduate student, and he was on the faculty at UC San Diego quite some time ago. I also worked for him at MCC down in Austin, Texas. And Jim is certainly one of the most thoughtful people in the HCI area and has just contributed some of the seminal papers in a number of different areas in HCI. I think most people here are familiar with Beyond Being There and his early co-authored paper with Don Norman and Ed Hutchins on direct manipulation, which was very influential, one of the few papers from the 1980s that's still highly worth reading now. So we're very happy to have that Jim has taken the time on his way to Beijing to give us this talk. And thank you.
So it's sort of suicidal to come at a time when Chi papers are due. I was up, as probably most of you were, like late last night and early this morning. We have 4 papers going in, and my graduate students and postdoc are like freaking out because I left town at a crucial time. But there's advantages to it too. You know, it sort of places them in having to do stuff they're going to have to do later. But okay, so what I want to do today is mainly maybe sort of introduce some of my students and some of their work is a first major concern, because lots of those folks are graduating, and some of them you know, like Anne-Marie, who was here at one point visiting, and working here, and working Marie at Stanford and things, and some of the others are doing things I think you'll be interested in, and so I want to mainly do that. But before I do that, I want to just point to some new work that we're doing that we're interested in and also might be of interest. And we're doing a lot more stuff with Anoto pens and paper, and I'm fascinated by the linkage of the digital and physical world, and as are many people, and I think it's a rich area for research, and we're doing some things with pens and phones because that's what people really carry with them, and there's lots of interesting things that come from that. But we've been this summer doing some work we have one of these huge display walls, at various times the world's largest, but not anymore today, I think. But 70 30-inch monitors, lots of computing power, the ability to see about as many pixels as there are people in the US, and what do you do with it, kind of things. And they have some of the, I guess this is going to be a little bit recorded, I shouldn't say it quite as bluntly, but some of the worst interfaces I have ever seen. I have video of them. The display wall is like, about the size of that end of the thing. If I can have workstations over here controlling it that are turned this way, and they do a lot of this, and it doesn't take like a lot of usability kind of concern to think, well, maybe there's a better way of interacting with that. But there are lots of, very interesting ideas about how to interact with it. One, we've done some multi-touch surface kind of interaction, sort of FTIR table kinds of things. But then you have people looking at the low resolution table controlling the high-resolution wall, which seems like sort of fundamentally wrong-headed kind of thing, although we're doing interesting thing with multispectral imaging of things, and you can rub off different layers and look at Da Vinci paintings and things like that with the multi-touch. And so this summer we've been looking at interfacing the wall with paper, which is turning out to be, quite a viable kind of alternative, where one of the things you're concerned about is how do you support multiple people interacting with this kind of large display wall. And you can have a little piece of paper and a clipboard and walk around with a Bluetooth Zenodo pin, and we have both relative and absolute coordinate areas, so you can move big distances and stuff, and you can interact with stuff on the wall. You can easily have, commands on the paper so that you, go to some other thing or do some kind of thing, or a command to sort of like, well, save me a history of all the stuff I've done so that I can refer to it again. And I just really love the fact of paper interfacing with a wall and controlling it, and it really supports multiple people dealing with it. So I won't say much about that, but I think it's an interesting kind of project. We're also doing a project on linking paper with what's going on your desktop or notebook, where we can have sort of notes written on paper and then link that into various web page, or where you are on a web, or where you are in a Word document, or where you are in a PDF. And we've done some trials of that this summer with folks. And the deeper idea behind it, or some of the motivation for the idea, was I've always been really taken by Scott and folks at Stanford's notion of this sort of using a big paper thing as a slow refresh display. It seems like the novelty of that idea I really like. And what really started it on us was the idea that people would have big sheets of paper on their desk, and they could continually keep notes and stuff of things they're doing in the electronic world and easily get back from that, but then also be able to reprint those kinds of things, so we scale down some of the information that you have and keep the spatial locations and stuff to it. We're not sort of there yet. We've just been dealing with notebooks and paper, but I think it's a very promising kind of an idea. We're also working with one of Mike Lest's students from Rutgers on a trauma pin interface, where this is in a trauma unit, children's trauma unit in DC, and they have a lot of paper forms that they make use of, so we're using the Bluetooth pin to sort of be able to real-time put some of that information up on display screens so they can have access to it. And trying to write some NIH proposals to get that funded, but it's an interesting thing. And then I have a student who's actually co-advised with Bill Griswold, and Lisa's been looking at sort of this informal sketch-based kind of use of the digital pen, where you can sketch in your notes in class, have those sketches, then go via your phone to your Facebook page, and that we've sort of been looking at the kinds of things people sketch, and also the kinds of comments that happen to those things on Facebook, which are different in character from photographs and other kinds of stuff. And so anyway, so I'm not going to talk any about that, but lots of students doing that kind of work that might be good to think. So I really want to sort of start off with some of the things underlying this. This is an awful resolution slide, but I think if I say sort of deeply what we're recently concerned with in the lab, we're very concerned with aiding sort of ethnographic kinds of investigations, sort of, and I have this old picture of, this is Ed Hutchins doing his PhD work in New Guinea, and he was studying land litigation arguments about when someone has died, the whole village gets together, and there's this passing down of rights to gardening spots. And there's a lot of recounting of things that people have done for this person and kind of things. And the thing I want you to sort of see that does it for me is this is a tape recorder. And is pretty hefty kind of thing. but the thing that strikes me about it is it really changed the character of the kind of research that could be done by capturing what people, Ed's just learning, the language and dealing with that kind of thing, but be able to capture the audio of that and to analyze it subsequently, I think is a kind of thing that happens in things. And I think these kind of technological changes really present opportunities. And if we look at science, we can find all kinds of examples where technology has changed and it's really changed the nature of science and things. Surely, DNA sequencing kinds of technology really, really changed things. The kind of stuff that we deal with, the web surely fundamentally changed, how you communicate with folks, how you do scientific work, how you collaborate, how you meet people, kinds of things. And hopefully, that kind of thing is going to continue in terms of computation and ubiquity of networks and connectivity and those kind of things. And I think a lot of it's for good and for ill. There's lots of negative kinds of impacts of that. But for us, the thing that really strikes us is there's this unprecedented opportunity to really capture real-world activity in a way that hasn't been possible before for lots of reasons, both because of cheap video and those kinds of things, but also because so much of the activity now happens in electronic kinds of things that can be captured, and lots of work going on here and elsewhere and that kind of thing. And it sort of brought me back to a kind of interest in activity histories that was very old. And we did some early work on what we called readware and editware, where we modified editors on symbolics list machines so you can date it to capture these very detailed activities of writing of papers or writing of code. And it really was motivated by an auto repair shop where, long story, but I'd broken down in Austin, Texas. Marvin Minsky had come down to visit, and I used to go to things with he and Doug Linnett and argue about things because I disagreed with both of them about most things, and they were fun people to argue with. And we'd go out to this Oasis Mexican restaurant and have things. And I was driving back one night and taking Marvin Minsky to drop him off, and I have this old Porsche that folks in the lab had given me this bumper sticker that said, his other car is a piece of junk too. And I broke down, and Minsky's there helping me with this, looking at it, and he's taking off things on my engine. And I was really impressed until he held up the air cleaner and said, "What's this?" And so I ended up in this repair shop. And the thing that really struck me is they had these manuals. And the manuals, because mechanics have dirty hands, I just bought some old Corvair cars, and so I have dirty hands too a lot. And they indexed the manuals just by doing what they did. Things they used the most got dirtiest, and therefore was indexed. And I was really struck by that, and I thought, well, gee, in a computational medium, you can build a physics such that the history of activity can be mined in ways that are useful, kinds of things. So we did a bunch of those work, and we did these attribute map scroll bars and things of taking over the display real estate and showing that history in the scroll bar and stuff. So I feel like this current work we're doing is in some sense a movement back to that kind of activity stuff. And we looked at activities on big software systems and lots of kinds of things. But now people are taking data of all kinds of real-world activity, and we collaborate a fair amount with Chuck Goodwin's lab at UCLA. And Chuck Goodwin does some of the just, I think, most beautiful work in that. And some of his work is, he and his wife looked at kids at play, but lots of it are video-based. He did this really interesting analysis in the Rodney King kind of thing, of sort of analysis of that video and the different perspectives on it. This is actually his father, who had a stroke and can only say 3 words, yes, no, and the word and, but carries on incredible conversations with people, uses other people's language, uses gesture, to communicate. And Chuck does these wonderful analyses of this kind of thing. And it's been very motivational for us to sort of think that now we can capture that kind of real world data in all kinds of domains and sort of analyze it. It becomes an object of scientific scrutiny in ways that it just hasn't happened, and potentially at a scale that was sort of unimaginable just a few years ago in terms of what could be done. And there's with this challenges, there's all kinds of challenges associated with this kind of notion too. Most scientists don't feel like they have too little data. Most folks feel like they're already drowning in data. So the thought of more data is not necessarily all that appealing, kind of thing. And so I think that there's a big scientific challenge in there of how to decrease the labor kind of use. If you look at ethnographers looking at video of real activity, lots of ethnographers don't. There's not many tools that are really supportive of a lot of that work. And if you look at them, they're usually using spreadsheets because you can do multiple columns, not that you're doing computation so much. They're writing down time codes on the video and going back to that kind of thing. So it's very label intensive. So few analyses get done. I mean, we criticize a lot of ethnographic things because someone gives us one case study. We want to know how representative of that. But we don't know that it took the amount of time it took to do that analysis of that one kind of study. And we sort of know about human confirmation biases that whatever you looked at you're going to say is sort of representative. So we've been motivated to sort of probably take on a task that's too big for us at a university environment, but to try to look at building tools to aid that kind of investigation. And I think one of the things I've been trying to do and that is that there's incredible opportunity for synergy between computer vision and this kind of things. I mean, we have a lot of computer vision groups, and I've talked to a lot of them in the sense that here is a class of people who have video data that they incredibly care about, are going to be annotating it and stuff, could really use, kinds of tools to aid them in automatic annotation of even simple aspects of that. And I was also motivated. We did a study. That's not where I wanted to go. Let me skip away a little bit. I was very motivated by some work of Sadi Loulou, who used to have a lab in Paris called the Laboratory of Design for Cognition, and was interested in interruptions, office work, kinds of things. And Sadi, not a very good picture of Sadi, he's now at the London School of Economics, but he took a lot of video, and I had always advised my students to stay away from video. The analysis is too complicated. It's a black hole you're going to go into. But Sadi sort of convinced me that you could capture lots more video naturally that you're not going to analyze all, but there might be segments of it that are really useful. And he came and gave a talk in our lab, and it showed this just little segment where it was a third-person camera of this office worker and capturing what was going on, and then he showed exactly the same segment from a a head-mounted first-person video camera, and it was just so radically different of the same. You could sort of, see this intentionality, all these kind of things that were going on. So I was very motivated by that. And then we did a long project looking at driving. My daughter was actually in an automobile accident, and she's fine. It was a pretty serious kind of accident. She fell asleep, had a head-on collision kind of thing, and if you look at this data from that, I mean, most of us have had that experience where that first, head jerk. The data is from, EEG studies that you've already been asleep for periods of time before that first head jerk occurs, kinds of things. But anyway, I got sort of interested in interfaces in cars and stuff from that, and I put together a proposal with a computer vision guy, Mohan Trivedi at UCSD, and it's the first thing we bought a car, on a grant. Ed and I once tried to put together a grant where we buy a yacht, unsuccessfully, but it was worth a try. But we bought this car and we instrumented it with a bunch of cameras. And this is not very good pictures, but one of my former graduate students and some head-mounted cameras. We actually had 10 video feeds in this car. We had OmniView things on top. We had cameras looking at, because we were interested in what the feet were doing, we had foot camera looking at the feet. We had cameras on glasses. These are coming not too good. We had, running a computer in the trunk of a car. I don't highly recommend it, but, digitizing the video kind of thing. We had like synced notes by student. This is a student assistant who's following on the drive. We had GPS and all that kind of data from that. But the thing that, and I won't talk about a lot, we were interested in, active cruise control and various kinds of mechanisms and things that, that are going into cars like at a pretty rapid rate with very little analysis, I might add, and scary in lots of ways. I mean, like the active cruise control like takes you a little bit more out of the driving loop, so you might feel a little bit more to be texting, doing other kinds of things, kinds of stuff. And we explored a force feedback accelerator pedal that took the radar information that was controlling the active cruise control and made it so that when something was closer to you, it was harder to press down on the accelerator, but keeping you sort of in the loop of driving. I won't talk about all that kind of thing, but we had all of this kind of rich video of that. And one of my postdocs and I got, so this is my first real time analyzing a lot of video data and trying to deal with it. And we sort of started doing these little MATLAB hacks to annotate the video in just simple ways. I mean, when people were talking, because we were in this fixed kind of car, we could make use of a lot of things. We could do a pretty good job of telling when people were looking at the rearview mirror or when they were that kind of thing. And it was just such a boon to the analysis to have that kind of automatic annotation. And it's one of the things I think that is a really nice synergy with computer vision kinds of folks, because so much of the vision industry research thing is focused on real time. And this is the kind of thing that doesn't have to be real time. So the whole classes of algorithms that the ethnographer doesn't care if it ran all week or all month kind of thing, if they came back with things. And lots of the algorithms are probabilistic, so that you can set a threshold. And, and if you don't get it all, but you get really reliable examples of indexing into the video of all the instances where that's the case, it can be really valuable. So we've been trying to push on that kind of notion. Okay, so let me tell you about some projects in a few minutes. One of the projects that one of my students, Adam Faust, is doing is a system that was called Data Prism until there's a company who has a copyright on Data Prism doing nothing like we're doing, but we're going to have to change the name kind of thing. But it's really a tool for annotating video and other time-based media. And I want to show you a little bit of that and talk a little bit about that. And then I want to talk a little bit about Gaston Cangiano, another graduate student who's just about to graduate. He would be a nice fit for a postdoc or things here. He's a really incredible implementer, lots of good ideas. And he's been doing this system called ActivityTrails that captures PC activity, screen capture of that kind of thing. Lots of similar work has been done here, I know. But tries to index into that based upon sort of all the key presses, content of pages, and to try to break up things into episodes. And I'll tell you a little bit about that because we're sort of enamored of that. And then Anne-Marie, many of you know, but she's become more and more interested in various kinds of assistive technologies. And I'll tell you, just highlight some of the things that have been published of her work just to remind you about some of the stuff, and then talk about some of the stuff that she's doing with a new system for digital pen for aiding in aphasia, kinds of things for speech-language therapists. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Data Prism. So this is some other slides, and Adam his interest is really in InfoVis, but he's been trying to build an environment where he could capture the activity of folks analyzing video. So he wants to build a tool that's good enough that people really want to use it, so then he can use them as the source of data about how people go about annotating video. And we're working in a couple of domains. I mean, one of them, Ed naturally is interested in flight. I mean, and that's his new sort of field site, is in the cockpit, and did a lot of recording in commercial cockpits until 9/11, and now is doing that in outside the U.S. But we also recently built this relationship with a flight school in Carlsbad that does simulator and flight training, and we have really, really good access there, both to being able to record what's going on in flight, and these are folks that get certified in a business jet, and then, you know, and this is supposed to be really safe, but I can't convince myself. They get certified in the business jet, then they get certified like in a 747 or something, all with simulator training, and then fly commercially, which, you know, I don't know, at least scares me, kind of thing. I know how good simulators are and stuff. But one of the domains we're working in is that, and Ed's one of our participants of that. And so we have like flight simulator logs in the thing. We have video from multiple camera sources. One of them is we have this little hat cam with a little camera inside the hat that we use in the cockpit to record video. And so let me just tell you a little bit about the key features of Data Prism kind of thing as a review. One of them is this multiple sources of data. So when we look at ethnographers and stuff, they're always have these various sources of data. And lots of them are notebooks, you know, notes they've sort of taken, kinds of things. So we support multiple video. We support digital LiveScribe pen with audio recording and kinds of things. We wanted, you know, lots of ethnographic investigation involves looking and trying to build like an understanding of this video, and it's sort of this evolving set of annotations and structuring of the thing. So we wanted to support some kind of flexible annotation system that people can use easily, and that develops on the fly and evolves over time and kinds of things. So it does a nice job of that. There's lots of time spent aligning various data. I mean, different video feeds, different kinds of, how do you align that with the time things that's recorded in the digital pen. So we have some good facilities for doing that. You know, naturally we're interested in multi-scale kinds of visualizations and being able to zoom up and zoom down, these kinds of things. So it's, you know, we're trying to integrate with things. We spend a lot of time. The Simile project at MIT has this, you know, sort of really nice timeline viewer, multi-scale timeline viewer. So since it was web-based and stuff, we synced up to that. We've been working with Jeff Hare and the ProtoViz stuff at Stanford and trying to make it easy to link into his toolkits, kind of things. So and we try to keep it extensible. So we have Python plugins, so you can write little scripts and even more than that, modify little scripts that other people have written for doing various kinds of annotations. And this is actually a script that Ed wrote to do some annotation of deviations from the path that you should take when landing, kind of thing, and then highlight various parts of that. So let me just show you a really brief little video of this. Now, if I could just find my mouse, it's someplace. And hopefully, okay, so that should do it. Maybe.
Data Prism is a new tool to support visualization and analysis of multiple streams of time-encoded data. Advances in technology have given today's researchers the ability to collect many sources of data about real-world activity. While this has great potential to answer scientific questions in new ways, it also presents a clear challenge of analyzing this data. A common example is video. Many researchers conduct research by systematic analysis of video of activity. This is often a tedious process of recording time-coded annotations about the activity that is seen in the video. However, in addition to video, it is becoming common to record several diverse sources of information. More and more types of activity are mediated by computers or other digital systems that can be instrumented to record logs of activity. Small sensors can also be used to record information about the environment and the research subjects, including movement, position, and physiological data. To support research with these diverse data streams, we developed Prism, a tool to support visualization and analysis of time-coded data. Prism can be used to visualize annotations on multiple time-synchronized streams of data, including multiple sources of video, simulator logs, and sensor data. Here, we use Prism to support analysis of data recorded from a flight simulator. For this simulator session, the researchers recorded 2 angles of video, a stream of data from the simulator, and paper-based digital notes. The timeline at the bottom of the window shows 3 tiers of annotations about the activity that is seen in 2 time-synchronized videos. These annotations are color-coded and displayed in different rows. For this dataset, we've coded different phases of flight, actions that are performed by the pilot, and specific navigation events. Prism also supports the visualization of time series data such as computer logs or sensor data. In this case, we can show data from the flight simulator log, including flight variables such as altitude and airspeed. This is shown as a time series line graph on a second timeline. Prism supports overlaying annotations on top of the graph and filtering to show only selected categories of annotations. Prism also supports the synchronized visualization of geographic position. The path of the simulated flight can be shown on a map. The marker on the map indicates the geographic position at the time that is shown in the video and indicated on the timelines. This marker shows the movement of the simulated flight as the video is played, and the marker can also be dragged with the mouse to move the video to a time point that matches that geographic position. Finally, notes taken with a digital pen during the activity that is being analyzed can be visualized and synchronized with the video. These notes were recorded with a LiveScribe digital pen that records timestamps for each stroke of the pen. This allows us to synchronize the notes with the rest of the data. The notes appear both as annotations on the timeline and as a digital representation of the page of notes. As the time slider on the timelines is moved, the progression of the notes can be seen. The researcher can also click on particular notes to see the corresponding points in the video and the timelines. Prism is designed from the ground up to be extensible to many types of data. In addition to the data types shown in this example, it also supports working with speech transcripts, importing data from spreadsheets, displaying waveforms of audio files, and displaying sequences of images or video frames. Prism is also designed to facilitate computational analysis of data. There is an extensible data analysis framework that can use analysis scripts developed using the Python programming language. For example, we have developed a number of plugins to analyze elements of simulated flight performance. Here, we run a plugin that detects the landing segment of the flight and computes a score for deviation from the optimal path. By enabling interaction with multiple synchronized visualizations of data, Prism increases the power of researchers to explore datasets and answer questions in new and exciting ways. It enables rapid synthesis of multiple diverse data sources and makes it possible to quickly and easily produce a rich coding of the activity that is represented in these datasets.
Okay, so again, this is a violation of one of my rules. Of what students should do is building a tool like this. There's been lots of these kinds of tools built in the past, and they usually die when the student graduates. So one of the things spending a lot of time is how to keep, and an NSF is not good at funding continuation of this kind of efforts. So one of the things I've been working on is a mechanism maybe to maintain funding of these kinds of tools, and doing some stuff with the guy Roy P. at Stanford, and has done also a lot of video kind of analysis and stuff tools. And our idea is to try to approach various companies. We approached a couple of Japanese companies where there's increased kind of ethnographic data being collected. And the notion is the following, is that we sell it sort of, convince them that they should invest in sort of a consortium to support this kind of tool, where the proprietary stuff that usually they're worried about is their content and not the tool kind of thing. And we're getting some interest in that kind of thing, but we want to sort of keep this kind of thing going, because we think this sort of ethnographer's workbench kind of notion is a really good leverage point, but how to make it really happen is sort of the hard point. So Adam's very happy to share this tool with anyone who's sort of a friend of the lab and things. So let me spend a little bit of time talking about ActivityTrails. This is Gaston Cangiano, and it's sort of a follow-up on this notion of readware and editware kind of notions that I mentioned. But Gaston has been collecting a bunch of data. He sort of started off not as interested in what we've ended up being interested in, but he's been studying a law office in San Francisco, and he's interested in the kinds of collaboration and things that happen in the law office. And it's an immigration law office. And so he built an initial system that really just did screen capture kinds of things of what was going on the screen. And then we had people review segments of that screen capture and talk about what they were doing and why they were doing this sort of auto-confrontation kind of method. And then both of us got quite fascinated by the richness of what people said about what they were doing. And the fact that it seemed like there was these vivid, often recollections of things that weren't in the video, weren't on the screen. That's when so-and-so came into my office. That's when I made a phone call to this other law firm. And I've written a couple of NSF proposals completely unsuccessfully. My gauge of Chi paper and NSF proposal is the more I like it, the less chance it'll be funded or accepted. But with the general notion that of aiding, and again, there's lots of relevant work that's been done here, of aiding sort of context reinstatement by providing some summary of activity. And initially we thought video kinds of summaries, and there's very interesting kinds of things of how you would summarize that kind of history in ways so you don't want to look at all of yesterday before you start work today, or all of a day when you interrupted some activities. So could you summarize it in shorter segments? Could it maybe not be video? Could it just be pictures? Screen capture kinds of pictures of that kind of activity. And the example I often use is, looking at, I was in Sue's office this morning, and her desk is like completely unlike mine. It's very ordered and kinds of things, so it wasn't good for making my point. But my desk is very messy, and if you look at it, it just looks like another messy desk. But when I look at it, I know that that's sort of things I have to take to a faculty meeting. Those are things that, I'm going to take home, those kind of things. And my conjecture is that looking at images of your activity might have that same richness for you, and maybe only for you. And if, it just seems like a very provocative kind of thing, if we could build things, and we haven't done that yet, that could help reinstate that kind of context. It could be applicable to just like lots of things that are done now in digital kinds of things. So anyway, so we got really taken by that notion, and some of the results of the SensCam thing, Abby Sellen and folks sent us a couple of SensCams, and we were sort of playing with those notions, but the kinds of things that have aided people's memory in looking at SensCam images and things. So we sort of went down that path for a while. And this is the way the interface looked of an early version. So So you had things sort of broken up into various things. You could click on one of those things. It would take you back to your screen. You could replay that. And the current system does a lot more than that. It tries to, and you should get Gaston to come and give a talk maybe about the details of this, because I think he's doing some really interesting things of sort of motivated by this sort of episodic memory notion of like things are broken, that we break the world into episodes. And that's sort of a natural kind of thing for us. I mean, all of this kind of research where people watch a video, indicate where the segment boundaries of that video are. We find out incredible agreement across people of those episodes. We find that things presented to them at episode boundaries are more memorable than during the episode kind of thing. So he's doing that. He's sort of building this thing. He wants to index into episodes. And he's built this sort of content-based addressing thing. So the goal is to sort of maybe better understand how to build these kind of episodic interfaces. And the idea is that visual kinds of things are going to be really powerful, that real activities are spread across applications. So recording the activity of any one of those applications is not going to get you into the right thing. That you need an interface when you're trying to reinstate this kind of thing that lets you easily switch between searching and browsing of that past activity. And you provide a sort of rewinding of the thing to try to get perceptual cues. Okay, so let me show you a little video of ActivityTrails that was done last night. And so it's a little rough. So.
ActivityTrails was designed to run as an invisible background process.
If I do this, can I do sound?
Once activated, the program responds to direct keyboard input, much like Google Desktop or Spotlight on the Mac. Suggestions appear as the user types, based on any frequent word that has been typed, read, or used in the past, regardless of whether it came from an email, a web page, or a chat window. Once a set of keywords is selected, the user specifies an approximate time by sliding a timescale. Or by selecting a specific day from a calendar. ActivityTrails contains a search engine that indexes moments in time in the form of snapshots of the entire desktop content, as opposed to individual documents. Therefore, the results from a query consist of chronologies of events where the search terms occur. Users can quickly get a glance at the results by rolling over the thumbnails previews. And when needed, they can expand the result to a full screen size. This gives a rewind desktop effect.
Okay, so
if there are more results, then users can scroll through time by hitting the forward button.
okay, that's a bit of a feel for it. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is talk a little bit about Anne-Marie's work. Some of this has been published, so I'll go just mention to review it. She's been very interested in sort of multimodal communication. Worked here with you folks on Surface for a period after graduating from Stanford, and we did this initial study of deaf folks and compared sort of experimental trial where we compared an interaction between a deaf person and a physician, compared where there was a sign language interpreter and when there were just this multimodal desktop for interaction. And Anna skipped through a lot of this. She did lots of really nice analysis of the speech and gesture of what was going on. But some of the findings were just how different the gaze structure was. Some of that, is sort of expected. But one of the things that happened when there was an interpreter is, the patient rarely looked at the physician. So you're missing all of those cues from gestures and stuff that the physician is doing, and things when you're dealing with the interpreter. And so very different structure of kinds of interaction. I'm going to skip through this to get to some. And then last summer we did some work with elderly population with desktop kind of interaction, motivated by the fact that more and more records, medical records are digital. We're, interested in sort of this kind of promoting this sort of shared ownership of the information that, I think the desktop displays and surfaces are really good at. I'll skip through that because I think most of you folks know it. And get to the last thing. We have some great videos of elderly folks. It's nice having the people in the lab that are older than me for a change. Let me skip through these videos and their attitudes.
I think the doctor's office is the place to do this because when we both happen to go, and the doctor's over here looking at the computer screen. We're not. I mean, we'd have to get behind the doctor to look at the computer screen.
Oh yeah, we have to probably be right.
So anyway, we've been working interesting with digital pens on a system for sort of authoring multimodal digital paper materials for speech-language therapists, and this has predominantly been with aphasia patients, usually as a result of stroke. Lots of communication challenges for these patients, and we've been working both with a master's program down at San Diego State that trains speech-language therapists, but also a lot with this particular therapist who works in a number of places, and lots of interesting things because lots of the current materials are paper-based, kinds of materials, and there's lots of interaction with it. And let me just sort of skip through since we're a little short on time and just show you a quick video of this. So how do I get this guy back to, well, maybe I can see my mouse, yeah. Okay.
Listen, adds 2 times.
Aphasia is a communication condition that typically results from a stroke or brain injury. People with aphasia have a reduced ability to understand and/or generate speech and language.
Jane. Listen.
These individuals often undergo speech-language therapy, a process that is largely paper-based. Therapists use worksheets, workbooks, note cards, communication boards, novels, and other printed materials.
Introduce them. Yes, good.
Write and Speak is an application for a LiveScribe pen that allows end users to create custom multimodal digital paper documents. There are 3 aspects of authoring multimodal documents with Write and Speak. First, you must configure the paper materials. Then you can program multimodal interactions. And finally, you can use the custom content by yourself or with others.
Computer.
A key feature of Write and Speak is that it allows users to write on, cut, glue, print, reprint, and manipulate a variety of paper materials. You can add stickers with the dot pattern, both opaque and transparent, to regular paper and other objects. Once you have configured your paper materials, you can use Write and Speak's pen-based interface to add multimodal content to paper documents.
Nose.
Nose.
We observed one therapist-client dyad use Write and Speak for 12 weeks in a clinical setting. The therapist used Write and Speak to help his client label objects within a photo of her living room,
Picture.
He also added transparent stickers to a variety of household items that he programmed to say the object name when tapped with the pen. Finally, the therapist used Write and Speak with existing diagnostic material by printing content on top of a blank sheet of dot pattern paper.
Boil pot of gold at 1 p.m.
For this activity, he had his client record each phrase and reflect on her pronunciation and articulation.
Beautiful. Okay.
Write and Speak enables creative uses of digital pen and paper technology that stands to benefit a variety of populations beyond adults with aphasia.
Okay. Well, maybe I sort of end up there. I mean, I think the goal was to give you a little taste of the kind of research that are going on and introduce some of the students in the lab. And we're using this pen technology, as I sort of said, also for interfacing with this big display wall. I mean, we have this huge display wall that there, and part of it is we can both build paper kinds of interfaces for that, but also little stickers that we can put on actually around the thing, so you can control the wall just by walking up to it and touching parts of it. Or we also put stickers on ourselves, and you can control things with a pen and just walk around. And if you're one of the rare people who still wears a watch, you can put a little sticker on the watch and then use that as a control thing for the movement or things around the display. So I guess in summary, the big takeaways of our interests are, one is sort of aiding ethnographic investigation, because we think that's the secret to building really useful and supportive systems, and that we're at a point in time where we have this incredible opportunity to capture real world data, but we're up against this thing of how to aid analysis of it. And then the other thread of our work is this trying to link the digital and physical world in ways that allow you to make the best use of either, rather than necessarily trying to replicate one in the other kind of approach. I mean, paper is, as Abby and Richard have well documented, is going to be around for a long time, and for good reason, kind of thing. And so how to really exploit that. So maybe I'll end up there almost exactly on the hour. So.
We have time for questions, comments.
HiPaper editing. I tried to get Sue to edit our papers while I was talking, but she had her own. Yeah.
On your highly interactive display, I was wondering what kind of applications that you run on that and what the interaction is.
You mean on this?
Yeah, on this
big wall. There's lots of. Well, it's being recorded. It's currently mainly used for demos. And I think one can take that in a negative way, but it's very new technology. They've built this pretty nice software substrate so that anything done in OpenGL is very easy to run on the wall, kind of thing. I think the gating function really is interface stuff, and that's why we sort of focus. We built this summer, sort of a substrate that lets us control it with, my iPhone or an iPad or with a digital pen, so we can look at some of that kind of thing. But I think the place, and some of the stuff is just, mind-blowing for lots of scientists, because they can see at one time an amount of data that they've never been able to see at one time before, and some of the kinds of interfaces of this multispectral imaging of things to be able to rub off various kinds of things in natural. We've done some stuff with, got some funding for supporting the humanities making use of sort of high-end technology. So we've done a lot of visualization of the history of artists' work and being able to show that history and interact with it. But I think it's like a lot of things, it's too early to really, until we have good interfaces that are sort of natural to use. Plus, the thing that I'm even more interested in the interfaces is how does this kind of facility interact in the overall ecology for a scientist? So what do I take back to my lab, or what do I take on my laptop with this? I mean, until we sort of understand a lot of that, I don't think we're really going to be able to build things that, that now it's great when we do a lot of video conferencing and you can partition the wall and we have, high-speed feeds, and it's really, really nice for that. But, not as nice yet for, supporting analyzing particular kinds of data and stuff. So I think it's early on, and it's too early to judge. And I can jest and stuff about the awfulness of the interfaces of it, but there's lots that have to be done with that kind of, how do you partition the space so that we're, multiple people using it, and how can I sort of delimit my space so that, when you zoom, I don't zoom. Lots of underlying software that needs to be built to really exploit it. But it's, I think it's, it's one of these things that you're seeing a bit of, surely all of these kind of big wall displays are going to become more and more commonplace, and projectors are getting really cheap, and all the stuff that everyone knows about, but that's, and projecting on to desks and things that you folks do all too well, and know about. But for us, it's interest in how do we make this sort of natural to interact. And lots of people think that, well, multi-touch on this one. Multi-touch is great on this kind of thing where I'm sitting here, but it's less great on, this kind of huge wall display kind of thing. And I'm real enamored of the naturalness of this kind of pen and being able to write notes and capture states and, like, save an image of that with links to the data, that I can get back to after, this analysis kinds of things. But it's early, and doing.
So apart from video conferencing, is the focus primarily on single timelines or displays, or the partitioning, or of other ways to partition space?
Most on single kind of things, but some interesting kinds of. Guy Kevin Ponto just graduated. One of the things he did in his thesis was this kind of thing of being able to look at video strung out over bunches of frames on this, so you could see big shifts and stuff, and so all the videos running, but you can look back in effect in time and forward in time, at this, the same kind of thing. So sort of partitioning it up that way, really, computationally interesting to be able to do that that kind of thing. But again, I think it's one of these kinds of mediums of representation that need to get explored, and I think unless it links into people's real activities, be like for a lot of years, these big supercomputing facilities that had visualization rooms, and you went to them always, and they were almost always empty. Because it wasn't that much better to be there than to be on your workstation, in your office. And I think but there's lots of things here that you can do that you can't do on your workstation. And I think the key is supporting, multi-person kind of collaboration activities in that, and I think there's lots of directions there.
Setting?
Pardon?
What is the room setting?
It's a big sort of.
Who's in there? Who's in the room?
Mainly the folks developing it currently.
So do they use it in the? So one thought is if it really became commonplace, one might like to have parts of it that are fairly static and parts of it that update more rapidly. Right. And they potentially are in the situation where they could have some of it devoted to long-term progress on projects, and others that you'd come in and you'd see where something had changed and other things hadn't. I don't know if that's
not being done yet. These are the same people that had the workstations turned the other way and are doing this.
Mirrors.
But I don't know. I mean, you've seen these kind of like really high resolution. This is like, this is really high resolution data, and it's pretty. This just doesn't capture it at all of how rich it is. To see and to be able to walk around and interact with it. It's just it's a fundamentally different thing. But I think it's going to take a long time. And again, it's going to be interface stuff that really determines if it's useful. And so we've been wanting to, what we really want to study is real use. Of it, how are people sort of starting to use it? What kind of problems they have with it? How can we, build interfaces that help with that? And so, this summer, I had a couple of students working on just building this substrate so that we can actually, have multiple pens and iPads and phones. Yeah.
Also, with respect to showing it to real users, how do you deal with or work with the novelty of these devices? Like, I can imagine you showed scientists like that, and they're completely snowed by. It's not because they're scientists, but because this is something that's amazing. So I just want to hear some comments about that, because it seems to me like that's a big part of what you might find in your studies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't have that data yet, from people using it that way.
Well, it's not just that display. I was saying it's actually throughout your talk, right?
Yeah.
The Annoto pen, for example, is a little hunk of magic.
Yeah.
And if you show that the first time, it's amazing, right?
Right.
And so one of the things that I keep seeing in our field is this sort of a lack of sophistication about thinking about magic and how what are you really observing in some of these studies? Some of the comments you might pick up from people that you just have in for an hour or two in the lab are going to be focused on that. And doing these longitudinal studies, it's great because you can get past that maybe.
Some of it, but it's when you're doing longer term, then you have to really, it's people's real lives that are getting taken up. I mean, we did this summer study of the use of this linking stuff with the pens, with digital stuff, and found all kinds of, that are sort of obvious kinds of results, but not surprising at one level, but very important for actual adoption, is that people are pretty sensitive to the nature of their pens. You probably, like I, spend a lot of time in pen stores, trying out and the way the ink, and we even saw a lot of people who were big users of it use the Annoto pen only for linking activities, and then wrote on the same paper with another pen. So a dimension that's going to have to be dealt with, or just subtle things like that of the feel of the ink and the size of the pen, and that can sort of kill sort of real evaluation. It's not like that's a crucially complex design kind of problem, but all these companies are just like the big LiveScribe innovation is like to make the pen so it won't roll off your desk, which is a positive kind of thing. But I hear what you're saying is how do you convince yourself of what's important about this kind of technology? I mean, I'm sure you have it with Surface kinds of stuff, that it's wowee, and now I can zoom and I can do all of these kind of things, but how does that really impact, real use, of it? And if you're like, especially in lab in a university, and you're trying to get something good enough for real use, I mean, that's a hard, kind of thing. So how do what do we focus on, and how do we do things that move the science forward in that? And part of it is just I think convincing folks of the potential of this kind of technology, and what some of the problems are that need to be analyzed. But
one of the only good answer that I've heard is when you build two systems that are both equally cool or funky or whatever you're doing, and then you just watch what people actually use if they're given the choice. But it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, people voting with their feet, in effect, about what they're really going to use. But then I don't know. In this kind of situation here, like you're a scientist, you care about the data and the phenomena. You can sort of see a bit of the potential of like this big display wall, but unless there's a lot of support, for you, the initial cost is too large, for you to even explore it. And I think it's.
You mean I'm going to have to come in here and analyze my data?
Right.
I wonder if there's some intermediate thing you could do with like program committee meetings, some sense-making kinds of things that you can do that extend over a day or two or three,
right.
but not sort of take over your life. They're focused. It could be a tool that you use compared to some
right.
other. That might actually.
Yeah.
That's at least tractable.
Yeah. I think that's kind of But again, it's like all this infrastructure that has to be built before. You get to, that level of being able to do that kind of trial. But I think it's something like a focused kind of thing where you could really compare with and without.
But you can also do remote PC meetings, which
Yeah. And this is particularly good because we have really good connections and really good videos.
CSCW hasn't gotten that yet.
Yes, I was just suggesting it as something that had a short enough time span, but also involved something where you some kind of sense making where you might want multiple displays or views or.
Right. But again, it's like you're dealing with people's what they're used to using, and just like the ethnographers who, they're used to using their paper notebooks and spreadsheets and it has to have real, tangible, current kind of payoff, and to get there, it's usually pretty complex to get far enough along that someone can sort of incorporate it into their work, and therefore that's why Adam has been trying to build this annotation tool that gets good enough that people can use it because it has this facility of being able to jump from their paper notes to the video segments and to annotate those kind of things. And then we can sort of start to look, I think at real use. And so we're trying to keep, a collection of folks, but and it's like when to introduce it, like a new technology that, still has bugs and has problems and, that first kind of thing that, you have a bad experience with, and it colors everything else after that. So, but I mean, that's not new to anyone, the kind of problem. But we don't have any magic solution. Silver bullet there. But.
There are no other questions. Why don't we thank Jim and
get back to editing HIPerSpace.